everybody. We're getting good at this. We're like on number 6, I think, at least of our...
I think 7.
7! Oh my gosh, I've lost track already. Well, welcome to the Catalyst Marketing Rant. I am joined by most of the smartest people I know. Robin Emiliani, Trevor Keating, and Jem Schwartz. And of course, I'm Mariah Kamei, strategist over here. Robin and Jem are our fearless founders, and Trevor, all things digital and beyond. I'm super, super excited about this topic. It's been on my mind for a really long time. So deception, addiction, polarization, globalization. What could I possibly be talking about? We're going to dive fearlessly into the topic of democracy and social media, guys. This is something that has been obviously in our news feeds, pun intended, for quite some time in the last few weeks. Just to kind of catch you up to speed on some of the things that came across our feeds this week. So Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, and Mark Zuckerberg, as well as Sundar Pichai, I'm going to mess that one up. They're set to go in front of the House Judiciary Committee, the Antitrust Committee, on July 27th. So super interesting to note that Google, Facebook, and Amazon together account for 62% of all digital ad spends for this year alone. So super monopolies, super issues in terms of antitrust. So let's definitely dig into that a little bit. Want to also note that Apple has made the headlines lately because while they're all a smaller player in the ad game, they also have done some interesting updates to their privacy policy that could really damage the in-app mobile ad market, and its impact could even be greater than the GDPR. So, guys,
wow.
Fundamental question. These are private companies. This is America. Should governments regulate social channels like Facebook and search engines like Google? Do the American people need protection from these evil, evil bastards, not to sway the argument?
Jem, I know you're dying to speak up.
I didn't think we were going to start here. I had some other thoughts on TikTok. I might forget if I'm just kidding.
Sorry, I won't let you forget TikTok.
Yeah.
Our moderator will make sure that we talk about TikTok.
Right.
We're going to bring up TikTok. It's like the new thing, but we've been challenged. Side note, we have been challenged by one of our clients to create a TikTok channel. He wants to see the Catalyst version of TikTok.
Yeah, he publicly challenged us.
But we have to accept that challenge. We'll put a pin in that, bring it back later.
Right. I do love that. Well, I told you I love that idea. Like 15 seconds of like us dancing or something. I don't know. I think
Jem thinks she can dance.
Yeah.
This has come up multiple times
we'll find
in these
out.
rants.
So my philosophy around just these companies that do really well and their ability to, as a result of them doing really well, monopolize the market, I think great for them. I know, Mariah, I know. I'm a capitalist. I mean, I love this idea that the best of the best win, and the folks who innovate and think about where are the opportunities and pivot in order to take advantage of those opportunities, I think do deserve the spoils. And I think one of the things that happens, right, in a monopoly is people are like, well, I can't compete, like, therefore I can't show how I'm better. But I feel like, back to TikTok, which I'm not obsessed with at all, I think TikTok has proven that that's not really a thing, right? Like Facebook was the thing, and then Instagram, and all these things. And then TikTok comes along. And it's like, what's TikTok? And it's surged to, 40 million users just in the US alone. I mean, there are entrants in the space, in any space, that can absolutely become a change maker and eventually a market leader if they're good enough. And if they're not, then they're not. So that's kind of how I feel about like the Google and Amazon. And just so you know, I'm not buying things on Amazon, right? Or I'm stopping going to Whole Foods because of how they treated their employees. So like as individual people, we can make changes in our behavior.
Wait, what? You stopped going to Whole Foods?
Yes. It's since the 60 Minutes episode, Robin. It's been 3 months.
Holy moly.
Part of my mourning process, right? But 60 Minutes, I saw that episode, which my mom made me watch. And I was like, oh no, like I can't, and I said,
wow.
Oh goodness, I don't buy Amazon. Like I'm not an Amazon Prime member. And my mom was like, well, you shop at Whole Foods. And I was like, why do they ruin everything? I did, like, why did they buy Whole Foods? Right? Like, I was super upset about when that happened. And I'm like, you're right. Like I'm complicit in this. I'm like, I'm out. And so I have not shopped at Whole Foods, which has been a really big deal for me because it's, was my happy place. So anyway.
Wow.
Trevor, I know.
I'm almost
right?
speechless.
Well, Trevor's going to agree with you. I think so. I think we have to have a counterpoint.
As Robin's also going to agree, being a capitalist herself.
You Mariah is censoring Trevor? Because I feel like Mariah is Googling or Amazoning or Appling or Facebooking. Okay. Trevor now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So I think, am I counterpointing? Nobody wants to counterpoint.
It's you.
Right? Yeah. So
it's just you, sister.
Good. I'm like, bring it. Okay. So first of all, 100%, let's lay down the fundamental facts. Like brands are trying to boycott Facebook right now. Let's note that brands are boycotting Unilever, right? They just said they're not going to advertise on those channels for a year.
Yep.
Other major P&G players are joining the fight. That is obvious. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg's sitting there going like, that's great, guys. Because are you really going to shoot yourself in the foot? One of my favorite strategists was likening this to the utilities company. They use coal. Nobody agrees with using coal. It's not the right energy source. However, are we all going to stop using our lights in order to
walk around with candles?
Yeah, walk around with candles. So it is truly a huge dilemma, I would say. And I understand this is like the fundamental cultural issue of America, right, and capitalism. So I want to posit a question to you guys, which is the reason that these guys are so successful, and I've been marketing in social media for my entire career, right? That's where I started. And let me just tell you, as a bright-eyed 20-year-old getting into the field in 2010 when this shit was new and exciting and people were like, holy hell, Twitter, Facebook, all of that stuff it held this amazing promise, as Reddit has always held, to democratize the internet, right? That's what it's supposed to do. You think about things like Arab Spring, you think about moments in time where countries that are under dictatorships wouldn't have been able to communicate, right? And the ability as a marketer to reach your consumers in such a genuine channel, right? So it held a lot of promise and innocence. I am watching this trajectory of greed and financial, right? It's all about the dollars and cents. More importantly, guys, it's not even about the money, because money, let's face it, is exponential. What it's about is stealing your time. This is a time economy. Everybody that's an app developer, think about the way that YouTube has designed its algorithm. It's designed to get you addicted to it.
Yes.
So you think
to
about
trigger dopamine. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that social channels are drug dealers. You get the first hit for free, and then you're fucking hooked. And I think under that premise, they should absolutely be regulated.
How do you want them to be regulated?
I want them to be broken up. I don't want them to be able to have a monopoly. I want them to have a committee. that
I don't
decides.
To me, it's not fair to say that they even have a monopoly, because the definition of our monopoly is that a single company represents more than 70% market share, which four of them represent 65. So I'm like, it's not a monopoly. And I don't even really understand how Amazon's even, I guess just from an ad perspective, they're bought into it. But the Amazon is in a different boat, in my opinion, than even, and I don't know, it's really, they're separate entities. One is so like, there's the social media side, there's the e-commerce side, then there's a search engine side, all that are kind of getting blamed for spreading. It just seems like a lump sum. They don't fit in the same category to me at all. We don't even utilize them for the same industries. So it seems kind of weird. But yeah, I think that they're all very, very different in how they look at things. I think Apple specifically doesn't agree with anything that Google does. Just fundamentally, they will always butt heads, even down to trying to limit the amount of advertising dollars and data that an Apple device will even share with these companies, to make it so it's harder and kind of disrupt the whole ad experience entirely. So I don't even know why they're sitting at the table. I don't know what role they play in that kind of adopoly. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to say that they each kind of contribute to this monopoly when that's fundamentally goes against what a monopoly is.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think there's so many things to unpack here, because social media as a drug dealer, right? It's like that's such an interesting point that I'm sure is something that has been circulated before today.
Yes, it's been on 60 Minutes, Jem. So
yeah.
You would not go on social media if you saw that one, if it convinced you to not go to Whole Foods anymore.
Yeah.
So.
But I do think that there's, I don't know, I still go back to, we have the ability as humans to decide how we spend our time, which, like you said, like money grows on trees, right? It is exponential. Time you never get back. And so to the extent that you're like, okay, I'm a mom, do I spend it with my kids, or am I on my phone? And, you know, I don't know that I need to have the government tell me the sort of repercussion that is associated with neglecting my children, whether I'm doing social media something or I'm out with my girlfriend.
But the government puts cough medicine now behind a closed case. So how is it different?
So you're saying that maybe the regulation is more about putting a gate in
Possibly.
front.
I mean, if we're controlling that, and if we're comparing social media to a drug dealer, shouldn't it be treated the same way?
Well, I guess I'm disputing the point that they're the same at the core of it, right? Because cough medicine, in my mind, if you play that out 10 steps, okay, so I'm excessively taking cough medicine, I'm now driving around, I now can kill myself and people around. Like, I can see that kind of getting to the next point. And so the parallel for me is more like texting and driving, right? Because then there's a danger associated with doing that while you're risking other people's lives.
Right.
Yeah, which is illegal, which I totally agree with should be illegal. But you said about the whole monopoly thing and should the government intervene. I do think that as it relates to these social media networks democratizing the world or giving people a voice, I think that that's still very much the core of what it does, to the extent that people have taken advantage of these platforms to put out falsehood. I do think that these social media platforms have a responsibility, which is controversial, to fact check and not simply say, well, you know, we don't control what Jem says, or Mariah or Trevor or Robin, and so they can say whatever they want. And there's opposing views, and the truth wins, or whatever it is that they're saying to justify their lack of involvement. And I liken their effort to eradicate the platforms and get those mistruths out with like their social responsibility programs. You know what I mean? Like they do programs that or they invest in programs that foster kind of a global well-being or social justice or whatever the case might be. And I feel like this is very similar, and it happens to be in their backyard, you know.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because one of the things that capitalism offers in a democracy is the ability to vote with your wallet, right? As I think what we're discussing. And of course, the brands that are boycotting Facebook are doing it at the urging of, you know, folks from the Anti-Defamation League, the National Association of Advancement for Colored People, a bunch of other folks. And they did just sit down right this week with Zuckerberg and Sandberg, and they were very unsatisfied, not surprisingly, with the response they got. So according to Mark Zuckerberg, you know, he owes nobody anything, right? Because he is a private company. He's very clearly stated he's not going to be the arbiter of truth. Some of the things that they suggested he do was hire a top executive with civil rights background, submitting to regular independent audits, and updating its community standards. He has probably going to do what he always does, which is try to placate and sort of push it off and get away with it, because he is a drug dealer and people will always come back to the crack. They fundamentally don't care. So I wonder where the compromise is, I guess, because if they didn't put cough medicine behind the countertop, we run rampant. I'm trying to think of like a country that has an example, because I think we're probably the most out there. Maybe Brazil. What does Brazil do? They're crazy over there in terms of like deregulation. But I wonder if fundamentally we can trust consumers and people. And the ad agencies, in theory, the big ones aren't joining this fray, because guess who owns them? Les Google. So like in the absence of any government standards of sorts, or just breaking up the monopoly. I know 62% is dangerously close to 70%, just for the record.
That's a conglomerate. That's not.
Yeah, there's multiple companies in the 62%, not one company.
Monopoly is
That's fair. That's fair. Totally fair. Totally fair. A counterpoint accepted. I wonder, like, if you think about it from the perspective of if they haven't regulated other folks like Microsoft back in the 90s, right? Google wouldn't even be a player. So the benefit of capitalism is that you're providing equal opportunity. What opportunity are we sacrificing by allowing these folks to maintain their systems as they are?
I guess I just see it as two separate issues. I mean, if social media as a category is the drug dealer, then I don't know that breaking up the monopoly addresses just the addiction to the drug as social media, because as you break up these companies, there's more companies coming in to fill those holes, and it's, you know, a fight to the finish line, right, in terms of market share. So I think the drugs just get better and more potent, right? And so that doesn't solve the drug dealer analogy in my mind. So I feel like that's one separate issue. The other issue, I think, is this whole idea of should 4 companies make up 62%, right, of the ad spend? And that to me feels very different. And I, to be very clear and in full support of the Unilevers of the world who are boycotting Facebook for taking a very Switzerland stance on, you know, whatever's on their platform is whatever's on their platform. They're not going to do anything about it, because I think as a technology company, they have the wherewithal to come up with machine learning AI-backed tools that can just gain a better understanding in real time of what's being put out there and compare it to some of the reports that are coming out from, you know, trusted bodies. And I think what trusted means, right, is to be defined. Like, is a CDC to be trusted versus something else, where they can really provide more oversight over what's being put out there. And then I do think that as humans, we have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to support Facebook, right? Like, I'm not going to be on Facebook anymore because I don't agree with what they're doing. And I don't know that that's too much to expect of Americans that we're all, that we have that choice, and we'll either make the right decision or not make the right decision based on, our viewpoint. What do you guys think?
I think, well, I 100%, well, you make a very relevant argument, right? And TikTok's the perfect example of that. Somebody that's come in and built a better mousetrap, so to speak, or a better, more potent drug. Definitely the behavioral thing is really interesting, right? Because it's something we grapple with as parents. How do you, and I'm just jumping into that fray. I know you and Robin, especially with your teenagers, probably are facing this more every day. But how can you provide them with the balance, right? What is the balance, and how can you educate them? I do wonder if app developers just in general, similar to a Hippocratic oath, need to take some sort of oath that says, look, I'm going to do what I do best, but I'm also going to take some level of responsibility. I mean, there was a huge story just recently about Robinhood. This kid, he was, Robinhood's an investment platform. You can join very quickly, very easily. Your first investment is free. Speaking of the drug analogy, the way that they've built their algorithm, they want you to stay engaged. They want you to keep playing and investing. So they sent him a notification that he had lost $700,000, which was going to change, right? He's a 17-year-old. He doesn't understand how the stock market works. He jumped off a train platform and killed himself because of it. So that's a huge culpability that I do think a Hippocratic oath comes into play a little bit with. So I don't know if you guys have any counterpoints to that.
I don't know. I think the responsibility is tough because you're going to take away somebody's First Amendment to say whatever they want. If you want to listen to them, that's on you. We have the same problem with the news. The news is super biased. Depending on what channel you turn to, you're only going to get one side of the story. And a lot of the information, while they have a requirement to be semi-factual, when it comes out that they were inaccurate, they don't correct it. There's no responsibility. There's no legal, real obligation that says there's going to be repercussions for what you just did. So I think it's not fair for me to say, there's a podcast I was listening to where a guy basically submitted a paper, pretended to be a female, and got a scholarship and an award to a university for coming up with this off-the-wall, completely just out-of-this-world topic that didn't really make any sense. And it was like an argument. I wish I had exactly what it was, but it was an argument that he purposefully was just trying to prove a point. And so I think that's the other side of the argument is some people are trying to poke holes in your argument by spreading kind of a fake news and seeing who jumps on that bus. Just to see how fragile and fragmented this really is. And it's not really a full argument. And I think that's an okay thing to do. I think you should be allowed to push something that is semi not factual. If somebody's willing to kind of go down that road because they don't really have a firm belief in what they stand for, I don't know. It's manipulative, but it also pokes holes in a system or in this other side of the story that maybe you don't agree with. And that's how you kind of pull out other information. I think some of it comes off as this whole fake news argument, but some of it is just meant to, it is a way to argue. It's the same way that we do it in selling and things like that all the time. We ask certain questions to make you think a certain way. It's the same way you spread news to get somebody to think a certain way so that you can prove your own point and your own opinion. I don't know. I think you start down the regulation side of that on social media and you've destroyed the platform in itself. And then it's going to die because people are going to not trust it because now they know that it's really has a real initiative because it's being kind of parsed through. The data or the information is only one or filtered. Semi-sided, which that's not fair. If I want to go out and say something and if I'm allowed to yell it on the street, I should be able to yell it on your platform. It should be no different. And I kind of agree with
let me challenge that, Trevor. As a mother of teenage boys, so if we're allowed to post anything on Facebook, truth or not, and I have a 14-year-old child, let's say, or 13-year-old boy that has a hard time making good decisions because he's not experienced, he does not have the ability to vote. We don't deem him as a responsible human being to be able to vote or drive a car. But he goes on Facebook and he's exposed to untruths. And then what?
I think we have an obligation to protect the youth. I think that is fair to say. I think if you're under the age of 18, you could be, there could be a regulation in place, or at least some kind of protection in place that says these are, but I don't know, it is hard.
But what percent of the users of Instagram or Facebook are below the age of 18? It's astronomical. So, to say, okay, no, we're not going to regulate that, but oh yeah, we're going to make it 18 and up. I don't know that argument is sound.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. Just because I hated all these crazy diets that were coming out for a long time, I wanted to write a blog about how I ate dog food for 2 months and lost 25 pounds because it's so ridiculous and so off the wall that somebody would do it. And I'm like, I don't know that I need to protect that person if you're going to go and eat dog food for 2 months.
But I too want to protect my 14-year-old who probably would go eat dog food.
Right.
You need to learn from eating dog food. You can be like, this is not working. It's kind of gross.
But I just think it's so nuanced. And it's so interesting, Trevor, because you had me at, if you can yell it on the street, you should be able to put on social. And I brought myself back to, yelling on the street only has so much reach, right? Whereas yelling on social or posting anything on social has, global reach. And so I do think that there's a distinction and a different set of responsibilities as a result. But to me, the regulation doesn't come with saying, hey, Trevor, you can't say that you didn't eat dog food for 2 weeks because, by the way, you didn't. It's more about, as it relates to maybe public health. I think there's certain categories that require the filtering of truth. If you were to say, well, actually only one person truly died of the coronavirus and everybody else, they're going to die of cancer anyway. The other 130,000 people, the only one person who didn't have any underlying symptoms died of the coronavirus, right? Which we all know, I think we know, is not true. But if someone were to put that out there, and because of the echo chamber, right, it creates this I feel like that's a perfect example where, well, no, it's not true. There's data and science from not one body, but multiple bodies who dispute that. To me, feels like that's where you come in and say, that doesn't belong on this platform, because the ripple effect is then people aren't social distancing, they're not wearing masks, they're not taking this thing seriously, and then 1 million people die, right? So there's a public health sort of implication to that misinformation. I think the whole Facebook thing at 13, and Robin, bow down to you, right? Because you are living it, breathing it, and you're way ahead of us in terms of practical life experience. And I'm going to sit here as someone, I liken it to when I wasn't a parent and I was on a plane with parents and their kids and judging the parents for how they manage the chaos of the kids, right? And now having lived that for several years now and having the empathy to know that there is no managing the meltdown in the right way, because it just sucks for everybody, the parents more than anybody actually on the plane. But for me, the answer would be, my kid doesn't get to have Facebook on their phone, right? And so then it's like, okay, but then they could look at it on their friends' phones. But maybe that's a limited sort of exposure than if it were on their phones that they have with them 24/7. And again, right, you could say, well, that's not realistic. So that very much may be the case, but that's kind of my thought, because as we think about protecting our kids, we would protect them from, hey, that's not an appropriate TV show to watch, right? I think of it in the same way, or hey, you can't go to that rave is there still raves like pre-pandemic? I don't know. Maybe that might be like a term.
Not anymore.
No,
Not post-pandemic.
Yeah, but you can't go to a rave at 13. Like, no, that's just not happening. And so I feel like it's some of the same, like I would categorize this in that way. And there are parents who maybe allow their kids to go to Coachella, anyway, at different ages. And so there are parents who are going to allow their kids to be on social media before they're 18 and all those things. And there are parents who won't. And I think would be on the side of parents who won't, because to your point, like they just don't have the maturity to be able to filter through, like, should I eat dog food for 2 weeks because I want to lose 25 pounds? Do you even have 25 pounds to lose? Why do you want to lose 25 pounds? You know, I think is more the question versus like, why are you eating dog food? But anyway.
No, I mean, so it's so interesting. Like, I think, one of the things I want to note is that like that goes back to the algorithm. So thinking back, right, like Facebook was an open platform. You could say anything. Everybody had an equal opportunity from a reach perspective, right? So like there was no paid reach. There was none of that crap. Now, because obviously they had to monetize, like now they've created an algorithm that rewards bad behavior. Let's be real. The more sensational you are, it's the same as the media, Trevor. And I'm glad you bring up the media, right? Because that's in and of itself something that we should not neglect as we think about this. But, you know, I think they did a great expose on one of the YouTube developers. He quit because he had a moral dilemma. And he was like, I'm creating an algorithm that is encouraging people to see a video that's like the one that they just watched and another one that's just like the one that they just watched. And that's when you get people really into the confirmation bias, right? Like, okay, I just saw that eating dog food. I'm getting another video that's confirming that I should eat dog food. Oh, I should definitely eat dog food. And it's a complete echo chamber, right? They've also done really interesting studies just in terms of human behavior. I don't know if it's just the 14-year-olds that can't discern the difference.
Yeah, right? That's very true.
Like they've done studies on college kids. You know,
40-year-olds. I'm sure. You know, like
there was a video called Plandemic. Did any of you guys see that on Facebook? Mm-mm. So Facebook and YouTube both removed it, separate companies. Both removed it from the internet because it was infactual about the coronavirus. It was kind of saying a lot of what you were saying, Jem, and they deemed it infactual. And so they completely removed it from both of the platforms. You could not post it. And then they were coming out with iterations and everybody was just constantly reposting until it would get removed. But I think that's an interesting one because it was a well-produced documentary. It was 25 minutes long and I watched the entire thing. It has like points and things that it makes you think like what was really going on. It's kind of a conspiracy theory type video. And they bring in some scientists and people that make it seem very factual, but it's still tough. Like they did.
Was it a hoax? Because I think I did see part of that. Was that about Fauci?
Yeah.
And about how he had planned this essentially.
Essentially, yeah. And
can you imagine?
Yeah.
But yeah, they removed that. So I think it's like, it's not to say that they aren't removing things that they find completely inaccurate, but it was interesting because so many people were getting so mad at Facebook and YouTube for removing it. And they're saying, they're not giving us the freedom of speech. This is a real video. This is out there. We need to spread it. And I had 1 million people in my Facebook feed losing their minds because they wanted to post this thing and they couldn't. And so it's like, even when Facebook tries to regulate, we don't even believe that their regulation is accurate. And we
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Well, I do love the O thing, Mariah, just to circle back on that, because I love the idea of taking a moment and pausing and saying these words out loud. And I think it, for some people, it'll have no impact, right? They're going to continue what they do and they're just going to kind of speed bump over having to take this oath. And I think for others, there's going to be more of like, wow, like I took an oath that this is a moral dilemma and I'm at a crossroads and I'm going, and there's a clear right or wrong, for that particular person based on the oath they just took. So I feel like it would, back to your point about compromise, like it feels like a great compromise to do that. And then Trevor, I guess about your comment about this video, I mean, when you say it's a real video, and people are like, what's a real video? It should, like, I should be able to post it. Like, what makes for an unreal video? You know what I mean? Like, what qualifies as real? Because there's a director and there's a lighting crew. You know what I mean? Like, I just, I think if it's not backed by science, and I mean, I've not seen.
But that's the point. It was supposedly there were all these doctors that were interviewed and people that had described how this had come to be and had worked with Fauci. Like it was compelling, I will say. I mean, I didn't make it through all 25 minutes like Trevor did, but I watched a good 10 minutes of it where I'm like, well, this is super intriguing. Seems like BS. Not sure, because these people do seem credible. They seem like experts. They legitimately seem like scientists. They're placing them in the right place at the right time. So in defense of him, I mean, that's what he's trying to say is like, this was a produced video. This was not like some ad hoc thing. And they were interviewing experts who they deemed as experts. And we have no way of proving that anyway, as with any video. So.
Right. Well, and then maybe in that way, right. And I don't know if Facebook said why they took it down. Like, is it that those people like, we're calling them doctor, whatever, and they're actually, not a doctor, but I'm wondering if the better response is like someone's creating a counter video to Trevor's point, right? There's a free speech platform and someone's saying, actually, like, here are your stats. It's like a campaign, right? Point for point. Like, this is how what you're saying is not true. And here are the sources that, by the way, go beyond one page of, it's, I don't know. That could have been maybe.
I mean, and that's an algorithm solve, right? Like there are ways to solve this, to manage human behavior. I think you also bring up a really good point, which is just like, as parents, as human beings, as global citizens, we maybe just have to do a better job of being educated about what kind of information we're taking in and taking it with a grain of salt.
I think to me, it's such a slippery slope, because then I immediately jump to, what are we showing on Netflix? Nobody regulates what we show on Netflix. You can have conspiracy videos. You can have, there's the Flat Earth Society. Fundamentally, we know that is inaccurate. Yet, there's somebody out there that doesn't.
You're going to get hate mail for this, Trevor.
Exactly.
The Earth is flat.
The movie The Game Changers, where it was saying that all humans should be vegan. There's a million counter arguments to that, but it was backed by science, and therefore a lot of people believe now that you should be vegan. And it's like, where do you draw the line of, okay, because this is this topic, we now get to omit your First Amendment, but when it's a different topic that's about your diet or what you perceive the earth we live on is, I think that's where it's like, it becomes so slippery that I'm not willing to say, yeah, okay, you can regulate my feed and you can say you can't post these types of videos. I think it's an onus on us that this happens all the time, whether we like it or not.
Well, this is interesting because you bring up something that I almost forgot to mention, which is the subscription-based model, right? Which is what Netflix is. You're paying for that. Facebook is free. Twitter is free. So they have to monetize in different ways. If you took that part out of it and it was a subscription-based thing, how do you think that would change to mix it up?
So Hulu does both, though. It's subscription and you get ads. I don't know how they work that out. But I still pay for it.
Right.
But in essence, so is like a cable TV. And I don't know. I don't know. I understand Facebook is free, but I think we've all adopted that it's a key platform, a key news outlet. Most of the news is free, and they still have certain requirements and obligations, but yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You just said something so loaded, right? You're likening it to a news outlet. So it does take me back to this concept of like, what is the culpability of the news, right? But anyways, maybe we've gone too far down this rabbit hole, because I know Jim wants to talk about TikTok.
Oh, well, Robin, do you want to tell us about the email you sent this morning? I think it's just fascinating.
Yes. So companies are starting to restrict their employees from downloading TikTok on company-owned devices because of the lack of security within TikTok, and that information can be stolen. So I think this is huge. Because I think most people's devices, or a lot of people's devices, are company owned. So to restrict something like this, I think opens a whole new can of worms.
And this is something government has already implemented a while ago. Any government official is not allowed to download any type of TikTok app. So it's kind of like
But are they allowed to download Facebook or Instagram? Government officials? They're not, right?
I don't think they are.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I know TikTok is a firm line just because the lack of regulation or separation between like private entity and the government in how Chinese or whatever their communist society works. So I think that was like a very firm line for our government, but yeah.
I think so what maybe I'm being obtuse about is like I find it very interesting that the Trump administration is like, hell yeah, like Twitter like is a free speech platform, like F it, and then they're like, but we think we should regulate TikTok because it's Chinese. Like, is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some politics involved, but I think it's more about, so I was trying to dig a little deeper into that topic. It's about the data security. And the way that the user information that there could be stolen, I should say,
Right.
And how the access to contacts within your phone. So that, I mean, Facebook's gotten in trouble for that too. So, and that has been regulated and shut down. So TikTok, I would assume, will follow suit, but we'll see.
I think that's what distress is, that lack of regulation.
Say that again, Trevor.
I think it's just the distress around we semi-control Twitter, our government can.
Yeah.
We don't have the regulation or control over TikTok.
Because it's a foreign entity, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It feels like such a huge opportunity for somebody to come into the market to create a TikTok-like platform with all those, without the ability, right, to go into like my location, I think they can all go into location services, but anyway, like without trying to go into my contacts and all those things, because clearly there's a desire and a need and a market for it already established. And so now it's like, go get it, right? And it feels like for that company in particular that you shared with us this morning, Robin, and the government and whomever, it's like, it feels like it's totally within their purview to say, hey, as an employee of ours, if you own our property, or no, we own our property and you're using it, you cannot on our property download those things. If you want your own cell phone and you want to do that, that's kind of up to you, right? So I don't think to me, it's a very, there's not a ton of gray area in terms of controversy as it relates to uninstalling TikTok on company or government property, because you have another outlet in that you can, get your own personal cell phone. But I think what's interesting about all this is that if we don't so back to your oath, Mariah, which I'm like kind of still thinking about, is like, can you imagine a social media company that started and they have all of their developers take this oath and they say, you know what, we are going to be, the way that we are going to differentiate ourselves from other social media platforms is that we're going to go into this business trying to do the right thing. And here's how we define trying to do the right thing and make that very, very, very transparent and say, like, we're a for-profit company. Here's how we're going to make money. And here's, how we're going to treat the consumers on our platform. And I think as people, we can decide, well, that aligns with my values or it doesn't, and I'm not going to do it or not do it. But I feel like there's an opportunity or a place in the market for a company like that to do really well, because it feels like everyone is being lumped into this whole social media is a drug dealing sort of thing. And what if someone were the counterpoint to that and said, like, no, we don't want to be that. We don't want to be one of them. We want to do it differently. And we think we can still make money doing it differently.
So I think Catalyst is going to start its own social media channel. So stay tuned. Since we're out of time, we'll wrap with that.